everybody has something to provide into this conversation, right? Everyone, no matter what gender you are, you have experience and knowledge and skill sets that can help somebody.
Hey guys, welcome to BloomX episodes in 2020. We have a great lineup for you guys. As you notice, we're in a new location, the Huddle Share Space. We'll be filming out here from now on. It's also where our offices are. And big shout out to MCRO, who continues to support us. If you guys need any apps, any kind of software development, definitely consider them in your process. They do a great job and they support us, so they can support you. Take care. Perfect. We're on. That's just to like figure out when to cut the tape and get it rolling. But Harman, man, what's going on? Good to have you on.
Yo, thank you guys for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. Like, you're a super interesting guy. We met at the VentureLab's event.
Made in York region.
Made in York region. Finally got a chance to meet you. We kept in touch on LinkedIn. What a great tool to meet people, right?
Yeah.
And like the event was great.
Yeah,
right, you're seeing all the things that are, again, made in York region, right? Came out of the region, and how I'm meeting the story of these founders. Because one of the things I appreciate is that York, it's such an old tech region. Whereas for Toronto, rest of the Toronto, like tech is like a new emerging thing. But tech in York region has been going on for like quite a while now.
Yeah.
And VentureLabs and the partnerships you hold have been ingrained into that culture. So you guys have about, what, 400 startups working under your belt?
Yeah, so our client base, in terms of how many we served last year, is around 400. But overall, our clients, we have about 2,000.
Yeah.
And so, and it focuses on supporting later stage tech companies. So anyone who already has a product, they're in market, and they're really trying to get to the support they need to build more traction, get more sales, right? If they're thinking about raising money, right? Getting support in terms of understanding how to set up their pitch, right? And practicing their pitch. If they're not thinking about raising money and they're just like, no, I just want to focus on building the company, then figuring out, okay, what are those objectives and what can we kind of facilitate to put in front of you to help you meet those objectives, right? The way we work is essentially, we have different programs that everybody falls into. We have our pre-accelerator support program for anybody who has they're earlier in the stage of development of their product, right? So necessarily they might have an MVP or it's not necessarily finished, but they show very high potential of success just because of the amount of industry expertise that they might have, or the level of insight that they know about the problem that they're trying to solve, the ability of the team that they're able to put together, right? Like, do you actually have people who can actually create what you're talking about, right? And like if they have that mindset, right? So if those if you see that, then you make the exception, right? But a majority of our programs fall within the growth stage I was talking about. So you already have something, you're in market. We have like our accelerated growth program. We have our newly launched hardware catalyst initiative and our tech undivided program. And then we have a whole other slew of companies or programs. And then for anyone who's kind of scaled and they're like, I don't really need these resources anymore, we have our strategic advisory program and our capital investment program. Those two specific programs focus on anybody who's just at this point where like, listen, like I already have my own space. I'm already doing really great, like I don't know, $1 million plus in terms of revenue, right, per year. I don't really need access to workshops on financial planning anymore, right? But what I really value is learning from people who've kind of already done it. They're already where I want to be. And if I can have the opportunity to sit down with them, kind of like at a mentor-mentee kind of basis, and get some advice, I'm willing to do that, right? And opt into that. So that's what our program, the strategic advisory program, is for people at that stage. And then capital investment, it's self-descriptive. If you're thinking about raising money, then we have that specific program for you too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, quite a lot of programs like under the program, under VentureLabs.
Yep.
And you're in charge of a few of them, right? Like
I'm heading up Tech Undivided, and I'm supporting Hardware Catalyst Initiative, which are new, recently funded programs. Hardware Catalyst Initiative is a first of its kind in North America, where it's a dedicated lab space that's focused on supporting the growth of hardware companies in semiconductors, silicon. And the idea is very simple. It's if somebody today in Canada wanted to create like the next, another phone, you can say, whether it's the next iPhone or the next BlackBerry or whatever, do they have the abilities and the resources and the environment to do it, right? Yeah. Chances are no. Why? Because the reason why a lot of people opt in for software is because the operating costs to just get started are so low that it's really easy to get in, right? Whereas with hardware, the access to the equipment that you need, the software programs to kind of create these designs, industrial designs and stuff like that, it's through the roof. Like to get an account to Synopsys, which people use for hardware, it's anywhere, I think, between $500,000, right? Fact check me on that, but it's a ridiculous amount, right? So nobody's really incentivized to even want to do anything, right? What they'll do is like if they have an amazing idea, what they'll do is I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go where I know I can make it happen. Where Silicon Valley, that's chances are that's where they're gonna go. So we kind of looked at the environment, or the leadership team at VentureLab looked at the environment. Just like you said, York region has a lot of history in tech, right? AMD is one of our biggest success stories, right? And those were just two guys at a U of T who just started in graphics processors. And it used to be called ATI, and they just exploded, right? And so it was that kind of mindset. Well, if you want more companies like that, give them the tools and the resources that they need. So that's what the lab is focused on, right? Super exciting. The first cohort's already been selected. It's already been published as well, who's in the cohort. And there's some crazy technologies, like very futuristic kind of stuff. And then our launch event's going to be happening on February 6th, where we're going to have the entire ecosystem, all the partners. We have AMD as a partner, IBM, and a whole other lineup of really amazing companies who are really kind of providing a lot of hands-on support. So we're excited about that. And then there's the Tech on Divided program, which is the basic problem that it's trying to tackle is the gender gap. And the idea, the fact that there's a lot of unconscious bias that exists within the tech ecosystem, right? So one fact that I like to refer to a lot, so if you look, so based on the pace that the whole world is operating at today, how long do you think it would take globally to close the gender gap? And that's determined on 4 factors like education, health, labor, and political involvement. How long do you think? If you had to guess.
I've heard this fact before.
Okay, so you have the answer.
No, I don't.
Okay.
I wish I had the recall for that.
Yeah.
But go ahead, please educate me.
Yeah. So it's globally, according to World Economic Forum, it's about 99.5 years. Okay. Right. And for North America, it's about 151 years. So what's like kind of shocking and disturbing about that is I won't see the gender gap close in my lifetime. And chances are, depending on the age of our kids, they may or may not see it as well, right? So that means like our sisters, our wives.
Sorry, did you look into like how they came up with this number at all? Like
so they determined it on those 4 factors. Okay. So they have an index that they've been collecting since, I don't know, like early 2000s, right? And they're always publishing a report. There's about I think 160 countries in the index, and they measure on those 4 factors. So they measure on educational attainment, health and survivability, economic participation, and labor, and then just political involvement, right? So they look at those 4 areas and they try to determine based on all the data that they collect, okay, like let's just look at how much male involvement there is and how much female involvement there is, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't know how they calculate it, but they kind of determine, they're like, okay, on average around the world at the current pace, it's going to take about 100 years. And then they break it up into different areas. So North America, they're saying 150, right? So like things that Canada does really well across the board for all genders is educational attainment and health and survivability. We're almost at 100% on both factors, right? In terms of economic participation, women make up 48% of the labor force, right? But when it comes to like political involvement, we've never had a female prime minister, right? First time I think under Justin Trudeau, we had that 50-50 cabinet, right? But even still, if you look at the amount of women politicians compared to men, they're still underrepresented, right? There's not as many, right? And in the report, it says this is a very crucial area because that's where societal change can happen, right? When you pass these bylaws and these policies and all that kind of stuff, right? So for them, it's like, they're like, this is a critical area where we need a lot of involvement. But then on the other end, you have to look at economic participation. Even though 48% of them are in the workforce, in Canada, I think 1 in 5 board members are female, right? And so what you're saying is that now you don't have a lot of female representation at the leadership level. There's not enough decision makers at the table representing that voice and that perspective of life. So now you're getting an underrepresentation, or you're not getting that level of insight, that unique insight that they can provide at the table. And so now you're kind of, I guess you're seeing a trickle effect when it comes to access to certain opportunities, or you go into this area of unconscious biases that exist in men, right? An example of that is like if a female entrepreneur is pitching to some VCs and they're all male VCs, right? The types of questions that they ask or the level of weight that they put on certain factors to help them decide on whether this is someone that they want to be helping or not can potentially be flawed or skewed based on biases that are more in favor of men as opposed to women, right? But what we're saying is that we don't know that exists, right? I 100% probably have them, right? But I don't know when I have them, and I don't even know what they are, right? They'll only be potentially shown in the decisions I make, right? So the program is essentially trying to focus on these factors. What we're saying is that the gender gap is so big, right? Unconscious bias is a big thing as well. We're focusing it on the tech ecosystem, right? And we're saying that we're focusing on supporting female founders in tech who are running their own companies, who are leaders in their own right, and giving them increased representation so that they can access opportunities, so that we can kind of level the playing field, you can almost say, right? At the same time, the uniqueness is that this isn't a by women for women initiative, right? There's a lot of those, which is an amazing thing to see, right? But for us, this is a by everyone for women kind of focus, right? Where it's like, we don't want to further perpetuate the exclusivity that men have been getting a certain level of treatment for centuries, and so therefore women should be getting special treatment now, right? And that should come at the cost of anybody else at the table, right? We're saying that we don't want to perpetuate that divide, right? That idea. Everybody has something to provide into this conversation, right? Everyone, no matter what gender you are, you have experience and knowledge and skill sets that can help somebody, right? So even though our female founders in the cohort may be female, right? The mentors that we're going to be bringing on board, it's going to be like a 50-50 gender parity, right? We're going to have men and female, right? And that's because we understand everyone needs to be having this conversation. Otherwise, you're just going to further perpetuate this problem, right? So yeah, we're excited about that. The first cohort has been selected. Our event is going to be happening where we're going to be launching everything in terms of who's been selected, partners that we have on board, mentors that we have on board. We're just in the process of getting all these things rounded up, but we're super excited.
Yeah.
Like the female founders that we have are just beyond words when it comes to the stuff that they're working on, the technology that they have. There's AI. There's a lot of diversity in the type of technology in the different industries. Digital health, fintech, clean tech, HR, marketing tech, right? So it's really cool to see. They all have products. They're all in market, right? They're already making money, right? And so what we want to do with the program is it's for 6 months, and you want to bring them in. It's starting in February, and then 6 months at the end of it, you have a demo day, and then we work backwards from the demo day. Essentially, we're like, okay, what are the key areas of support that you need? So we do that by having a milestone meeting. Our internal advisors who have years of expertise, they sit down with each of them and they're like, okay, let's talk about what are your current areas of focus and what we can realistically accomplish by the end of 6 months. Where do you want to be in 6 months? And then let's work backward from there. A lot of the things that we're going to be focusing on is their ability to pitch and present. It's going to be on their financials, right? It's going to be on helping them with whether it's their sales planning or their sales cycle, but how do you kind of get them more customers, right? Yeah. I
mean, this was really, so I know you can't talk about the companies, specific companies, because it's not announced yet.
Yeah.
So let's not get into the exact details, but I mean, you kind of, one of the things I appreciate about you is like you're kind of seeing the structure of this program, which is so fundamental, right? And in developing these kind of companies, and especially in this kind of realm where it's solving like a social need as well. What goes into constructing these kind of programs?
What? Sorry?
What goes into constructing these programs?
Oh man. So okay, there's a lot of feedback that's required, right? There's no point in creating something if you don't get the involvement of who you're creating it for, right? So it's very, very customer first approach, which is one of the values of VentureLab as well, right? And if you look at VentureLab, like if it was its own startup, our programs are our product, right? This is where you're going to provide your highest level of value for anyone to even want to spend any time, right? Because time is the only resource we don't have. So you really got to sell the value, right? And so that's for us, that's our programs. And when we're creating it, like we have an amazing team of people who kind of create these programs, right? And they really dig deep when it comes to really going the extra mile and understanding what's the problem and how am I going to go out and solve it, right? So our programs team is kind of mainly in charge of that. Also led by women, and like the level of intense focus that they bring, and they're always willing to challenge themselves. They're always open to new ideas, but they're always willing to put their foot down when they know something is right and when it's to the benefit of the entrepreneur in that specific program. It's phenomenal. So, and from my understanding is what goes into the development of the programs is speaking directly with the entrepreneurs, understanding what resources we have and what we can make happen. And then just kind of like, you're just putting two and two together almost, right? You're really kind of, you're just trying to line up all these pieces so you get the maximum or the highest amount of output from it. But the vision stays the same, and you're always in pursuit of the vision, which is you want to be building tech titans that build in Canada but go global, right? So as long as you're always reminded of the vision, which the leadership team always does a great job of, you're using whatever resources you have, whatever partnerships you have, whoever you know, to create something that's being informed by the end user, right?
I mean, that's what I want to get to the core of, right? Like these programs developed by VentureLabs and companies like this. You guys are the brick center, right, for of York region?
Yeah, so in Ontario, there are 18 regional innovation centers. They all, from my understanding, they're all operated independently, right? And there is no formal reporting structure to the Ontario Network of Entrepreneurs, which is what it's supposed to be falling under. So everyone operates independently, but yeah, like we are the regional innovation center for the York region. So we're serving that entire market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, I mean, under this infrastructure, like you have so much government oversight and bureaucracy, I would imagine there's so many checks and balances to developing these kind of programs and move forward.
Yep.
How long does it take to develop a program like this? To really get all the partnerships in place, to have strategic players, right? To get all the checks and balances.
It depends, because you're working within the fiscal year of whoever your funder is, right? So for nonprofits, like public money is a big thing, right? So you're using government funded money to kind of create and execute and deliver what you said you were going to do, right? For us, it's about economic prosperity, right? We're helping companies become more successful so they can hire people and increase jobs, increase overall the amount of money within Canada, right? Increase business, all that kind of stuff. So how long it takes? So there's planning involved before, right? That can take a couple months in terms of what is it that you're pitching, because you're going to be pitching something before you even get funding to deliver it, right? That takes a couple months, and that really depends. It depends on the focused amount of time that it can take, and it could be like, how long have you just kind of been thinking and noodling about it, right? Like it's been in the back of your mind because you've been observing it and you've been taking it in for like the course of how long you've been working with VentureLab, right? Or you've just been in the industry, right? And then once you kind of, I guess, have your focused attention of figuring out in a structured way what the program is going to look like, which can take a couple of months, then you find out. So you got to just play the waiting game and find out if you received the funding or not. Once you've received it, then it's like in the application, you've already written down your target dates. Like, I'm going to have the team hired by this date, right? The program's going to launch by this date, right? So you're giving yourself, I don't know, realistically, maybe 2 to 3 months of an in-between time on each of these things to execute, right? So it's a lot of work, like, because like what you're trying to do is you're trying to be realistic, but you're giving yourself a stretch goal, right? So it's like if I say like, okay, we got to create a program in 2 months, right? And you're like, how am I supposed to create a program that's going to be serving entrepreneurs to go global? And I only have 2 months to figure this out, like the structure of, right? It's like, well, just figure it out, right? Because that's the stretch goal. It's going to force you. It's going to be the forcing function to really get you to sit down and come up with something. And then just as long as you have this mindset of always being iterative, right? Like the first version of it's not going to be the final version of it. We have this process of collecting data, collecting feedback, and constant improvement.
Yeah.
I think you're doing a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so this is what I want to understand how you guys function, right? Because like, it's interesting you said like these VentureLabs is like a startup, a nonprofit, and you're really pitching it to funders into your programs. Are these funders generally is the province, the city, the region?
Yeah, all across the board.
All across
so
the board.
federally, regionally, provincially, municipally, right?
Cool. Is it like a fraction of each on each program?
Yeah. So it depends on the program, and it depends on what you're asking for. And then at the same time, there's a lot of private partnerships as well, with different corporations where you receive funding for different initiatives as well.
Yeah. I mean, generally these corporations, they get to see companies that develop all these programs and potential partners for them. Is that the relationship there? Like,
I don't know about seeding. So VentureLab takes no equity in any company that comes through us, right? And we don't partner with people that have some vested interest in getting equity from the dollars that they've put in, right? The relationship is mainly it's putting them in front of the entrepreneurs, in front of the clients, because it's possible that they might be a client themselves, right? A lot of these large multinational enterprises, they're B2B, right? So their user is going to be a small to medium sized enterprise, right? And we have like about 2,000 of them, right? So for them, it's like getting access to that market, right? And then just kind of putting their value adds in front of them and kind of telling them, or having the opportunity to tell them that A, we support you, right? Through the fact that we're actually doing this funding, right? Two, did you know that our product or our service also supports you on your journey, right? And have you tried it yet or not, right? And then three is just general, it's brand exposure for them, right? Yeah.
Cool. So like, I mean, let's go to like the direct relationship there, right? Like, do the funding companies, right, do they see these startups as potential customers of their product, or if they could be potentially solve problems for them, or like, you know?
I think it could be both. I think a lot of companies obviously have to be able to keep their lights on, so they do see it in that sense of support now, and then later on we can talk about the details in terms of like compensation and whatnot, right? But we really try to find companies that align with our values, right? So we're looking for people who kind of see that the entrepreneurial journey is not easy, right? A lot of support is required, and you have to have a long-term vision, right? You have to understand that the payout for you is not immediate. There's no short-term gratification here, right? It's really a relationship that builds over time, and then based on how you work and how the relationship is, it determines whether it stays or not and becomes sustainable or not, right? I think that's generally how it kind of goes, or it should go.
I mean, then again, it comes down to that, right? Like, it's really hard to quantify, and it's such a high risk kind of game that the innovation economy runs on. What are the potential outcomes for? And kind of what you guys do as VentureLabs is kind of minimize the risk for all parties.
Right? 100%.
By putting through a program, giving all this strategic support, you're minimizing the risk by minimizing potential failures.
Yeah, and it's so funny because like I had a friend who's in the hardware space. I remember I was just talking to him one time, and he had a friend as well who's an entrepreneur, and he was just telling me he's like it's actually harder to fail at starting a company today than it was ever before. Like, it's like, if anyone wants to start something, it's actually not that hard because of the amount of support that exists in Canada, right? Even in, like, if you look at OECD, which is like, have you heard of them by any chance?
OECD?
Yeah, so they're a global kind of think tank, you can almost say. So they do a lot of reporting on entrepreneurial activity, kind of like the Startup Genome Report. Kind of like that, right? And so even they've taken a lot of data and published reports where they've noticed that also in Canada we have one of the highest numbers when it comes to youth entrepreneurship. They're like the next generation in Canada when it comes to entrepreneurial involvement is higher compared to so many other areas, right? And so they're like, it has a great foundation, right? Now what the focus has been for like the past couple of years is how do we get companies after they've already started, and how do we get them to scale, right? How do you get them from just like a team of like 2 to 10 people who have a product and they're just getting into the market to someone who's like at an international level, kind of like an AMD, right? How do you do that? Right? So now that's the major focus. So yes, we do help subsidize the risk. Or minimize the risk.
I mean, that's really great to hear, because again, York region, like what it used to be known for is that innovation in York region used to be employees of these bigger companies spin out with an idea or something. They develop an idea and generally get bought out by the company they came out of or other companies. And it's like an IP kind of generation. So incubation became like a way to generate IP that can be bought out for X amount, and for the founder or ex-employee, it's a way to generate some like a lot of capital really quickly and capitalize on an idea. but it becomes like a region that kind of innovates amongst each other.
Mm-hmm.
But now lately, York region has made a considerable effort to shift, and I think that's also because of Canada's larger goals as a nation, right? Is to create more scalable companies that can, grow and not just be absorbed into larger companies as like innovation engines or like just as new thought, but actually become their own independent entities. How has that shift been? Have you been there for this process, or it's happened before your time, or you're still seeing it now?
I think this happened definitely, like the conversation changed before I was at VentureLab, but I was witnessing the conversation change. Because you can just kind of see it based on you can see it based on, first of all, if you look at all the incubators and accelerators, right? First, it was just incubators. Everybody was just focused on helping startups. You have an idea, and you're working on an MVP. Apply, and we'll give you the support you need, right? And they were just like, it was just this huge funnel, right? And everybody was just saying yes, yes, yes. Then after a couple of years, you started noticing that, okay, the focus now needs to change. We need to stop focusing on the earlier part of the entrepreneurial journey when it comes in terms of the product, and we need to start focusing a little bit later when they're actually in growth, right? And then everybody just started saying, okay, we're only focused on growth stage companies, right? And we're focusing our time and our efforts on growth stage companies, right? So I know I witnessed that, right? And it was interesting because then it's like, okay, then who's supporting the earlier stage companies, right? If everybody who's these big players in the innovation ecosystem is supporting later stage companies now, right? Then who's going to kind of pick up and support the ones who are earlier stage? I think that's where you see the value of like co-working spaces and community groups, right? Like even though these incubator and accelerators that focus on growth stage are focusing some on early stage as well, there is value in community-driven incubators, right? Where it's just people who kind of understand that I'm not part of this academic environment, I'm not part of this corporate environment, right? I'm not part of the government kind of conversation, right? I'm outside of all those three things. But even still, there's a lot of people who aren't getting support, right? And so I'm on the community side of things. And how can I create something to give them a value, right? Like just because their idea or solution to a problem might not fit in our focus of like a tech product, let's say, right? It still doesn't mean that it's not solving a problem, right? That a certain amount of people could potentially be facing, and that could still be something to kind of be fulfilling to them, right?
So let's talk a little bit about you, right? Like how you got involved in this whole space. What kind of drew you to this environment where you want to be a supporting factor or facilitator for these kind of startups?
So for me, it started when I was at Western. In my second last year, I applied for an internship at the on-campus incubator, which was called Biz Inc. Now it's called Propeller. And I didn't know what I applied for. All I knew, because I've worked in like fast food industry, I've done like hard labor in terms of like warehouses and stuff like that, right? And I'm just like, like I'm about to finish university. I'm like, I got to really kind of get some experience so the transition will be easier, right? And I knew that I'm like, I need to have an environmental change, right? I can't be working in these like, not to say it's a bad thing. For me, I was just like, I can't be working in the fast food or the warehouse manufacturing kind of space. I got to get into like the office environment, right? Whatever that means. I didn't know what type of office environment or anything. I'm saying if I can go to work and wear a collar shirt, I'm good, right? So I applied and then I got it, and that just kind of broke so many preconceived notions I had about business for me. Like at that age, I always used to think that like, okay, to be a successful business owner, you have to have your degree in business, right? You got to put at least that time in and get that valid certification to kind of tell you, you have the skills and the knowledge to go and be successful here. Whereas when I saw people coming through the space, like I saw people from all walks of life. I saw people who were in the business programs saying that it's not what you think it is, right? There's nothing that can substitute experience, right? And I had people who had no business background running businesses and making good money, right? So it just kind of broke that idea that I had. That's what it took. And so it really kind of helped me because I started building a network. I started meeting all these people, and it was just this community that of individuals who were all running their own companies, right? Everyone had an idea. Everybody was pitching. Everyone was trying to get money. So like my network kind of became that over the course of like the year and a half I worked there. And then so when I left and I graduated, I came back home, and I was just like I'm missing that, right? I had this value that I was getting from London, Ontario. I'm back to Brampton. It may or may not exist already, but it wasn't something I was experiencing, right? Maybe if I did a little bit more due diligence and I actually kind of did my homework and like, okay, what's happening in Brampton and going and get involved, maybe I could have found something or would have found something. But I didn't do that, and I didn't think it was there. And then so I had a friend who was also part of that environment with me at Western, who also lived in the same, we both lived in Brampton, who also came back, and we're both like there's nothing to do here, right? So then it was just like, okay, well, what if we just solve our own problem, right? And like, you know, you always have one friend who's always coming up with ideas, and you're always shooting them down. You're just like, you don't know what you're thinking about. This was one where I was just like, yo, this is feasible. Like, this is actually could probably work, right? So it kind of became a summer project that snowballed so fast. And essentially it became a co-working / community incubator, right? It's called Lab B, it's still operating. And it just kind of fell into it, right? Because we didn't realize how fast that snowball was gonna roll, that we didn't realize how much of our life it would have ended up consuming. And before you know it, you're full-timing this thing, right? With no pay. Like, we had no money for like, I don't know how many years, maybe 2.5, 3,
Jeez, yeah.
right? Right out of school, parents being like, yo, what the hell are you doing? Like, go make some money.
Yeah.
Like, you need to support what's going on in this environment, right? And where you're just being like, just trust me, like, this is gonna work, right? So, and it did. Like, we were a co-working space that was for profit, that pivoted to becoming non-profit and community focused, right? We didn't have a sector. We were sector agnostic. It didn't matter who you were or what background you're coming with. As long as you were someone who had this mindset of, I want to be productive with my life. I don't want to just waste and do anything, right? I have this idea to do an event, or I have this idea to like sell some merchandise or whatever, right? We were there to be like, all right, cool, we're here to support, right? Yeah. So we did that. We met some amazing people. We met an angel investor who kind of saw the value in what we were doing. He met us 1 year into it, and then he met us 2 years after, right? And between that 1 year, when he talked to us, he was just like, you guys are still working on this? And we're like, yeah, but we didn't have a space, right? We were doing like coffee like jellies, right? So we'd meet up in every other week. We'd meet up in a coffee shop. We'd just publicize to the community, hey guys, if anybody wants to work together but work independently, like, here's a community of people who are doing this, right? So we were doing that for like, I don't know how many months. We were doing events where literally like maybe 3 people would show up, and we were fortunate enough to get a local boardroom or whatever, right? But he was just like respect, you're still doing it. So he's just like, you know what? He's like, I've actually been thinking about getting a space as well for my own business, right? Somewhere I can work out of. So he's like, he's like, what I'll do is I'll get one large one, but you guys got to pay me rent, but I'll subsidize how much you have to pay me. So I'll take a portion of it. It'll also be my space to work out of, but this is for you guys to pilot and test it out, right? So that was that one act of generosity, just like, it turned that person into our mentor, who stuck with us for like until today. Like, he's still supporting, right? And like, we went from 800 square feet to now it's about 3,200 square feet, I think.
I mean, that's a crazy concept, right? Like, you pushed ahead even though you don't have the space to run it as like a for-paid business. Like, screw, you found spaces like the coffee places and run a meetup. There's still a lot of people doing that right now, and running meetups, and meet up in different restaurants and places, and just gathering people. When did you figure out? How did you find that valuable? How did you know that that's gonna be valuable? Would be valuable?
Well, it's because we experienced it. Like when we were at Western, I experienced it at the incubator I was working at.
Okay.
Right, this space that was for entrepreneurs to come and do their work. Right, my partner, he experienced it through just being coming to those events and stuff, and knowing people who are also working out of the space and also interns, but also getting a tour of someone doing a co-working space. Someone just in London ended up getting an apartment, right? But they just turned it into a co-working space. Instead of having a bedroom, they're like, this is a private office, right? Instead of like the living room, this is the open co-working space, right? And that's when he's like, yo, wouldn't this be cool in Brampton? I'm like, you know what? That actually would be wicked in Brampton, right? So it was just the space where like, it's not a coffee shop, it's not a library, it's somewhere where like like-minded people can come, get together and just do work for themselves, right? And like doing events was a huge aspect of that, right? So, and then all the research that goes into kind of figuring out, okay, well, so we know what we want to do now, how do we do it? There was a co-working movement. There still kind of is. I'm not as plugged in as I used to be, but at that time, in Toronto, I think there was about 10 to 20 co-working spaces already operating at that time.
What year is this?
2000. It would have been 2013, around there. 2013, 2014.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
Not much.
Yeah.
Going on then. Yeah.
Yep. And then, but like globally, there was a lot in the US or some in Europe and a lot in like Spain, Barcelona, stuff like that, right? But there'd be these national posts every year to be like, okay, what was the growth of co-working spaces? And every year it was doubling. People were just opening them, right?
Yeah.
And then there's like, on Google, they have these group chat forums, right? So, and it was public, anybody can join Co-working Ontario, which is all the owners of co-working spaces in Ontario who basically ask questions like, yo, like, how do I do this? How do I do that, right? So that's it. I just became a part of the conversation to be like, okay, what do we have to do? What's the first step? They're like big influencers were like, before you actually get a space, find your first 10 people, right? That was like a golden rule, right? Find the first 10 people who will cut you a check and be like, I will be using your space on a monthly basis or whatever, right? They're like, then go get the space. Don't get it before, right? So we followed that. And they're like, and to get to that, do these weekly or bi-weekly jellies or co-working sessions at coffee shops, right? Start building your community, start doing these events to find those first 10 people, right? So that was the focus. But then we realized, like, just because that works in some areas doesn't mean that'll work in our area, right? There are other factors that are unaccounted for that make our problem unique. Because we did that for a long time and it didn't work. It took a long time. And that's when we were like, yo, there's a lot of education that's being required on our part to tell people this is the value of what we're trying to sell you on, right? This idea of working amongst a community as opposed to working in these isolated offices all the time and never talking to the person next door, right? But people, it didn't resonate. Like there was a lot of education required, right?
Can I ask what was like the demographics of the community you were building here?
Very multicultural, right? Brampton is, it's like visible minorities are a majority, right? Just like in any like
just
suburban
like
area. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. Especially a lot of Punjabi people, right? A lot of South Asian people. But the diversity that we saw in terms of like freelancers and entrepreneurs, that was from every walk of life. We didn't have, like, I can't say that 80% of the people that use the space were Punjabi or they looked like me or whatever, right? I can confidently say it was right across the board. We had kids coming out of high school being like, yo, I want to do a pop-up shop here, right? To like, we had Rupi Kaur, she did her first book launch out of the space as well, right? Like we did a painting gig together before, right? Because she went to Turner Fenton. She went to the same high school as my partner, right? He reached out to her. He's like, do you want to do this painting thing? We're just trying to kind of, we're trying to do something that makes people turn their heads, and then we're gonna pitch them on what's our initiative, right?
Yeah.
So we did like a whole painting thing where people are like, yo, what are you guys doing? And they're like, oh, we're trying to create a space for creative people, right? Creative entrepreneurs. Voice crack, my bad. And then
it's cool. So I mean, you're really plugged into all these creatives and people doing things, because right from that age you're like, I need to create a community, I need to build something, I need to give this voice, or like at least a space for the spaceless, right? I mean, I felt the same kind of value when I was at UTSC, the hub, and working at, again, an incubator. And it's like, wow, we need more of this. You know, why didn't we have this growing up? Like, why didn't we have these kind of spaces? And now we're seeing an explosion of Huddle Share Space here. It's a great example of that. Again, in Scarborough, right? What a quality space it provides.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And like, the more of these popping up, I think it's fulfilling that need, right? The community itself now is driving it forward. And part of that is because of the changes in the environment. The way people are working has changed, right? Entrepreneurship and innovation has become more the economic tools moving forward in life. I want to hear some of your thoughts on that, right? Like, Canada's going through this phenomenal change right now. We're all geared as a nation. I mean, there's innovation centers opening up in like Sudbury, in Thunder Bay. Right, Barrie just hired the city of Barrie hired an entrepreneur in residence to come and to give a voice for entrepreneurs, right? Like, so what is going on, right? Like we hear about the fourth industrial wave is starting off, and new levels of industrialization is being possible. Mostly driven by the SaaS companies, right? But like, why is Canada suddenly thrust in the forefront of all this? Like, we've been a tiny nation, like, next to the giant, which is the United States. But over the past decade, it seems like we're kind of at the center of this whole like windstorm, right? From someone working within the more of these institutions, what do you think? What's your thoughts on this?
I think definitely Canada is it's definitely very progressive, and it's very, very, it's a leader when it comes to innovation, right? The fact that we're already implementing like code in our public schools, right? Kids learning to code, right? Like, that went from a outside school private value skills development thing to them understanding, like, yo, there's skills that the next generation of kids need, for them to literally being like, okay, you know what, we're going to start implementing this in schools now too, because kids need to be able to understand the language of technology, right? And then we're frequenting a lot of tech conferences, right? We're always on like big stages around the world where conversations are about the 4.0 industry, right? But at the same time, now we're hosting big conferences as well. Other than our own local ones like Elevate, right? We have Collision, right? Collision is the biggest, right, tech conference that happens every year, right? And even the organizing team saw the value that, like, yo, we need to be in Toronto. Like, there's some serious density of talent, and of entrepreneurs. And when I say Toronto, I mean like GTA Toronto. I don't mean just Toronto downtown, right? Because obviously we have also Waterloo, we have York region, and like you said, they're cropping up even in the suburbs, right? So the fact that Collision's happening, it's in its last year. So the way that it was pitched was that they're only going to do it for 2 years in Toronto, and then I think they're going to figure out, okay, do we want to come back or not, right? I went last year. I've never seen that many people in a conference before. There's so many people, and it was so big. Like, man, my legs were hurting. Like, after the first day, right?
You talking about Collision conference?
Yeah, right. But I'm using Collision as an indicator of our success, right? The fact that we are so progressive, that we have so many of these entrepreneurs, that when you're organizing conferences for the world, they're even understanding, yo, we need to have a footprint in Toronto, right? I think. Whatever our leadership is doing at the governmental level to understand the value of technology and how we need to kind of be pushing forward, because they're doing stuff where, like, they have programs where they're specifically investing in the most successful tech companies, right? Like they have applications for people to apply for VC funding. That's from the government, where they're like, we will give you like, I don't know, however many millions of dollars to solve these specific challenges. If your technology can do it, we will give you this much money to do it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're creating these incentive networks. You're going around and communicating the message of what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
It's just now you got to really focus on retaining the talent, right? Giving people a reason to stay and really kind of focus on building their companies here. And I know you've had VCs on your show. I don't know if they've talked about the landscape, the VC landscape, but like when I hear entrepreneurs talk about pitching to VCs in Canada as opposed to the States, they're like, I want to be in the States, right? They're like, over here, when we do our due diligence and when we want to make a decision to kind of invest or put some money in, like we take forever. We're super cautious. Yeah. Whereas they're not the same over there. No. They're not. They're just like, oh, you're saying that I'm one of the few right now. Like here, I'll drop some money right now, right? So I think maybe there has to start being a shift there now. We need to kind of start figuring out, okay, what is it that is kind of, I guess, what's unique to us, but that can also help our entrepreneurs, right? So I'm not saying give up your cautious mentality. I think that's, at the end of the day, it's conservative, but it's because we're thinking as much about ourselves as much as about the opportunity. But how can you kind of, what can you provide or what can you do for the entrepreneur for them to be like, I'm gonna stay in Canada then, right? I'm still gonna, despite this, right? Let's figure out how to overcome this obstacle, right? But I still am gonna stay and build in Canada as opposed to going seeking money somewhere else, right? But I know that Canada as a whole, in terms of its leadership, they understand that. I've heard them speak about it, right? Yeah. I've heard the Minister Bance speak about that challenge. And I know they're working on ways to solve it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing. Like, it's so interesting about like how the government has shifted. Again, leadership is doing a great job in supporting and giving enough infrastructure for these entrepreneurs and the innovation economy to really kick stuff and really to captivate what's going on right now in the marketplace. But I mean, I think there's also like a sociological shift that's also happening, where the institutions that were created for a different age are now in conflict with their new way of life. Yep. And they're being forced to modernize. I mean, we had earlier today Dishan from Knowledge Hook, who provides SaaS solution that's changing education, making not just the kids smarter and access to technology better, like through technology give them better training tools, but making teachers better and parents better. They're already operating in New York region. Nice. And and like how our institutions are changing and how society is changing and looking at entrepreneurship and these innovations, right? Like there's a learning curve we're all going through. Yeah. But I feel like we're all going somewhere. Yep. Without knowing where exactly we're going. Yeah, no, 100%. We're all treading into these murky waters. Yep. And a lot of people are kind of feeling left behind. They're lost in that fog. Yep. And not sure where to step around and move around. And places like VentureLab gives that kind of guiding light, but it's only so much you can do. Yep. There's only so much you can give in service. Yep. Right? So how do we create like a collaborative ecosystem which kind of captures all, right? Like I look at the ultimate kind of deleveraging of risk, right? Especially for entrepreneurship, is have that some kind of cushion, and not like welfare system or like any of those programs, but
you got to give them some sort of safety net,
some kind of net,
so that if they crash and burn, at least something will catch them. Yeah, right. Yeah.
Have you followed all like Andrew Yang's campaign in the States?
For like universal basic income?
Universal basic income?
I haven't followed him, but I know about universal basic income.
Right, so I mean, it's an old system, it's an old idea, right? I mean, championed by a lot of different people throughout history, but it's kind of resurging now, almost like a solution for this. Yep. I see is like resetting people's value from, zero income to having some positive income. Yep. That being the cushion, allowing you to, jump around and knowing that money will be coming in, you can spend it towards something.
Like, when you hear it like that, like it sounds amazing, right? But it depends also on the personality of the individual. You'll have people who'll just consume it. Absolutely. And do nothing, right? But then you'll have people who'll be entrepreneurial because of it. They'll be like, holy shit, all these reasons that I have to go and get a paycheck are just kind of being facilitated for me now, right? And so now I actually have the time to actually work on something that I want to work on, right? Which can be like, it's like freedom in its own way, right? Because like everybody is working a full-time job, but potentially has a side hustle, right? So this provides you with the opportunity to make your side hustle your full-time hustle, because you don't have to worry about getting food on the table, having a roof over your head, right?
Absolutely. And more than that, I think like the way the economics work for that is that, again, it's like a portfolio.
Yeah.
Right? The people are the portfolio.
Yep.
You're going to percentage of bad eggs who's going to consume and just like take advantage of the system.
Yep.
Of course, it's like any welfare state. But again, looking at any kind of social system that we've had in the past, this is not a social system, but more of an institutional level, right? You kind of invest in the people directly. A small portion of them would fail the curve. Some people will have that bounce around room and it'll take a long time to invest in. But then some people who like would be superstars, right? Who even regardless of having this or not, they're going to succeed.
Yeah.
You know, almost every incubator or like space like that has seen these guys.
Yeah.
You know, you're just lucky to capture some part of their growth,
but
they're just on a rocket ship.
They're our own local Kobe Bryants.
Yeah, exactly, right? And the idea being is like, if we can have this infrastructure being settled and like a new kind of social contract where you get to have this cushion to like boost your growth and move around, but as you succeed, as you move forward, you give back to feed the system, right? And this kind of security net is kind of seen as like not like a tax or not like government led, but more like a collaboration using technology to mesh all the players together, right? So like I know like there was like some crypto plays into trying to do this.
Yeah.
Right? How to share your equity within a system, so that if like a certain percentage, the top 30% succeed, some of their wealth will be redistributed to the ones that failed, so they can at least try again. Because everyone trying and moving forward is better than like a lot of people dropping off. Right? Because in the end, it boosts potential talent pools and potential workloads that other people who actually succeed can actually use later on. It keeps the game going. Keeps people in the game longer. Right? And I mean, we've had so many people here talk about this, right? The people who really do well in this entrepreneurial game treats it like a game. It's like, it's not about the money coming and going out. It's like you have to spend the money. You can't be anxious about that. It's not about, you got to take the leaps, you got to take the risks. But at the end of the day, you got to calculate about how to keep going along the game, right? Like, have you heard of Simon Sinek's new book?
The new book, yes. I haven't read it.
Yeah, I haven't read it either, but I've been devouring his content about it because it's such an interesting mentality, right? How you're in these two types of ways you can play this game, and, you know, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship. The finite game is when you have a certain goal, a certain kind of mindset, and you're there just to get that end result. But if you don't get it, you failed. But if you do get it, you know, you're out. But then the infinite game, the ability the wanting to play for the sake of staying in play, right? And when you're in this kind of mode of playing for the sake of playing and keeping as long as playing, you make very different strategic kind of moves. And it changes your mentality and changes what you're doing. And
like, I think that also goes into the idea of like fixed and growth mindset, right? Fixed mindset's that idea of like, my failures and successes define me. Whereas a growth mindset is my failures don't define me, my successes don't define me, like be humble, right? And I'm just focused on improving and learning and having this constant feedback loop where it's, I don't see me not achieving something as a bad thing. I see it as a learning opportunity, right? And I take that in and then I'll do it again, right? Whereas, and it's like what you're saying is like for people who are playing these two games, there are people who are playing the game where it's like I'm doing it for the sake of the game. I'm just playing. That's it, right? And I don't ever want to stop playing because I love the game, right? It's just figuring out what's the game that you love to play, right? Whereas I think that's where people need to figure out like what's that thing that you want to spend the rest of your life doing that despite all the obstacles that are going to come, and like don't ever psych yourself into ever thinking you'll pick something that doesn't have any obstacles, right? It'll still be fulfilling. It'll still be okay, right? Like it's fine. Like if I'm choosing a career in photography, right? But I have just no idea because I don't have any retainers of people who have contracts with me, right?
Yeah.
But you accept it. You're like, okay, that's just the challenge that I chose to have, and I chose to live with, right? And and I'll overcome it because I have this mindset where I'm gonna try things, I'm gonna fail, but I'm gonna learn and try something else, right? And then I'm just gonna then I'll succeed over the long term, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about his book, but I do see the parallels in those ideas, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of leads me to like kind of what we're doing here, right? Like we're interested in the games that these people play. Like everyone is kind of, whether you know it or not, they should be playing at something. Like you said, like, you know, whatever find out what you're good at and what you're going to focus on in building the rest of your life, right? Whether it be that skill set you hone down and make yours, or else the ability to build new things that can build wealth for you.
You just got to figure out. It's like, because kind of going back to UBI, it's like, okay, the position you're in today is, okay, let's say I'm doing this 9 to 5, but there's this game I really want to play, but I haven't made that leap yet, right? But if I had UBI, I could be playing that game, right? And getting the support. It's just interesting.
And society should, I think that social contract there, the new one, right? Is that it's better for us to fund everybody playing this game as a holistically we gain more out of it than we lose from, like, you know, the people who are going to swallow up resources. It should become so cheap to provide this resource that the loss of it doesn't matter as much anymore. In fact, there's feedback mechanism to maybe prevent it, right, and guide people back to a truer path. But as long as, I think the first stage is to measure it, right? And that's one of the things I'm really interested in. So, I mean, we don't talk much about the tech side of what we do here on the podcast, but one of the things we're interested in looking into is how do we measure the games that we're in, right? Can we use technology to make people better, right? To make them more empowered rather than fearful and anxious about the rate of change technology is providing, but themselves feel empowered, right? How do we change that dynamic?
It's a very interesting challenge. That's a very cool game to play.
Absolutely. And that's what we're interested in. And again, Harman, man, this has been great. Like getting really into your mindset, especially your institutional mindset. You have the knowledge of being part of part of VentureLabs and what you guys are doing there. A really great job. I really hope to work more closely with you guys. Talk to a few more of your companies. A few companies have already come on the show.
Nice.
So hopefully we can see more of them. And again, thank you for everything you do, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.